Hello, I'm Martijn Gaat and this is Does Logistics Matter? A podcast on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics. Answering yes to the question today is Miguel van Asch, Head of Data and Analytics Services at Ahlers. In this episode, we talk about the power of data. Miguel takes us through the steps of creating your own digital twin. And we talk about how you can run different scenarios from operational excellence to customer intimacy and analyze the impact of these scenarios on your supply chain. Please enjoy my conversation with Miguel van Asch. Miguel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martijn.
My first question to all of my guests is always, does logistics matter?
And I think you never get a no answer to that because we're in this podcast. No, it definitely matters. And I think more and more over the last couple of years, I think logistic networks, supply chains have become so global for every company. Things are happening so fast, and you see companies more and more focusing on that logistic chain. And I think for us, we definitely believe that it matters. We try to take, I think logistic costs typically range over around 10% of the total company costs. So it has become more and more a focus. For a lot of companies, you see chief supply chain officers appearing in the board of directors more and more. A lot of people or companies are now looking at their supply chain networks, making it more efficient because the cost becomes more important. So it definitely matters. And we believe that with the technology of today, with the data-driven world that we're living in, that we can make a difference in helping companies out to achieve these results. So does it matter? Definitely, yes.
Good. Well, I absolutely agree, and you are right. I have not yet had a person, a guest on the show who said no. I am looking forward to the first person that will say no, because I will definitely be curious about the reasons behind the no. So, Miguel, how did you end up in logistics?
Well, actually, in my 6-year career, I've been working in logistics. I've always been working in logistics. So I started as an intern after my studies at Antwerp Management School, where we had a project to understand and investigate the power of data within supply chains. So that's how I end up investigating different data strategies for different companies, looking at how can you bring data products to market from a logistic point of view? How can you translate data insights and use them in your supply chain and logistics network? That's where I started, and then end up at Ahlers, where I've been very much involved in the data analytics services department, which is quite a young department within Ahlers. So we started around 6 years ago, investigating all kinds of different services, and have now built it up to a point where we are serving not just existing Ahlers customers, but also new ones. So people who are only using, or companies who are only using our data analytics services. Um, and have been there ever since. Now I'm managing a team of around in total I think 6 to 7 people, with all a data background and a supply chain background to help companies finding optimizations in their supply chain.
Yeah, so that's pretty unique for a logistics service provider. Usually, they provide the logistics services, warehousing. They manage transportation, asset based or asset light, and all these things. But you guys actually have a specific data analytics department and a separate service.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. exactly, and it's kind of a little bit in the DNA of Ahlers. So we're an entrepreneurial company. We try to evolve together with our customers, and I think the
Mm-hmm.
feedback on data analytics came very much from our customers because they were the ones that were telling us, you collect a lot of our logistics data, you manage it, so it's the data is in your systems, you know where it comes from, you have the expertise, knowledge in logistics to also think about what you can do with it. So that very much led us in using that feedback and trying to do more than just the traditional things that are reporting and showing what they have, but also think with them to improve their logistic networks and to really look for optimizations, to really look for an improvement in their logistics KPIs, so that we can be not just their traditional logistic partner, but also help them in a more data-driven and on a more strategical level. So that's exactly the path we have chosen as Ahlers.
So how does that work? So I run a company. I have a complex supply chain. I have a large logistics operation. I want to do something with that data. How does that work?
Well, it depends, of course. Martijn, as well as I do, that different companies are in different maturity levels in their, let's say, technology and data analytics process.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
are many frameworks around that, and it's also not bad to be in whatever stage. I mean, you focus on your core things and you do what you do well. But we know that there are different maturity stages within your data analytics journey. You have companies
Mm-hmm.
who are more the front runners and already investigating, doing things with artificial intelligence, have complex data layers and stuff like that. But there are other companies who are still doing their reporting in more simple tools. Think of the one everyone knows, like Excel, for example, or
Excel.
who are
Yeah.
doing more reporting. So I think that's the first step, having that assessment on, okay, where are you today? What data do you have? What do you collect already? Because there are also stages in types of data that you collect. You can collect simple order data and cost data, but you can also go a little further and collect Internet of Things data. So really um, uh, um, data coming from sensors, etc., that are in trucks, so you can get the position of your trucks, for example. So that assessment is the first step, understanding a bit what they have, and then there's more a business approach to it. We try to be very pragmatic. We try to understand, where do you want to go, what do you want to achieve, and what are the savings you want to achieve. What are your objectives? Do you want to improve service? Do you want to go for a cost optimization? Um, and what are the specific needs for your logistic network or for your supply chain, where we can help to understand it. And typically, then the next step is once we know what data is available, once we know the goal of what we want to achieve with the data, then we bring in the technology, and then we try to make what we call a digital copy of the logistic network.
Mm-hmm.
The more standardly used term is the digital twin. Um,
Digital
yeah,
twin. Yeah.
but these digital twins help us to model, or at least to understand the current situation, to understand what the customer is currently doing, and then helps us to make what if analysis, make scenarios, help us to to think about where can we go next. And it's from the moment we have that digital copy that we can start improving, start understanding where the bottlenecks are, and where we can evolve together with the customer to really think about their pain points and how we can solve them.
So, and you're talking about a team of 6 to 7 data specialists. So people that are, yeah, that know everything there is on how they can work with this data. So it sounds complex. Do you in what stage do you start working with these companies? I mean, do you work with companies that are starting out in the data game, or are you working with the companies that are advanced, or is it any level?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, yeah, since we're already for a couple of years in the business, our customer portfolio really covers the whole spectrum, where we see
Okay.
that the need for help is very much in the earlier stages. Companies that don't have the capabilities themselves for doing these type of exercises, they are of course very much interested in our help. Um, but we have also companies who really leverage this digital twin technology, who really use it on a more permanent basis and not on a one-off project, who really, and we call that continuously design their logistic network. So they refresh their data, they update their algorithms, they try to reuse their data to train the artificial intelligence algorithms and the machine learning algorithms. And also there we see that they take most of the value, because the more you repeat these type of exercises, the more you work on live data, and the more your algorithms are trained, the more benefits and the more value you get out of it. So in that sense, we help customers along the way, but we try to evolve with them to come eventually at that stage where they reach a better data maturity, let's say.
So for companies that want to start, where do they start?
Well, again, it's we typically start with a project of a couple of, I think typically it's 2 or 3 months, where we really try to understand both the data side as well as the business side. And probably that business side
Hmm.
is even more important than getting a hold of the data, because every supply chain, and you know it better than I do, Martin, but every supply chain, every logistic network has its own specific needs, but also its own specific constraints, certain things that cannot be
Yeah,
optimized, certain things that should go a specific way. So that's very
yeah,
much part of that project where we start off with, to really understand what is so typical about this customer's supply chain. Um, and then we also try to guide them in their data journey. So we have, and there again, it's about maturity. We have templates that they can fill themselves from their own reports, where we say, can you please help us in finding, or can you fill our data template so you understand what exactly we need from you in terms of the needs for building that digital twin. Um, but in the more complex projects, we build interfaces directly with the customer's systems. So it's really a first-time project, I would say, for a couple of months, 2 or 3, to get to know the customer, but also to understand their data requirements and their data needs, to to um, to then start playing eventually, and start defining the scenarios, start defining where do we want to go, start defining what should we monitor, because where are things going wrong, to then come to an improved state, let's say, and we call it the to be, or the most optimal scenario.
and do you think of these increases in efficiency that you try to find, or these problems that you pinpoint? Are they problems that the companies say, we have a problem here, or we have a problem here, or do you also look at at all the data available, and then go, hey, we've analyzed the
Mhm,
data, but there's a huge problem
mhm.
here. So do you also, by analyzing this data, find problems that companies didn't even know they had?
That's a good point. I think typically the need comes from a certain pain, let's say.
Yeah, yeah.
There's always something where they struggle with, and where they think maybe the digital twin can help us out to monitor and to really understand what's happening, and to understand what the influencing factors are. but we see it quite often that um, the results, or at least the drivers of that specific pain, is not always what the customer was expecting. So by looking at the whole network and by taking a holistic view, um, we can typically find things that they were not expecting. Because if you look at, and that's quite typical in supply chain, if you don't look at the end-to-end view, so if you don't start with a supplier, then go all the way to the end customer and every stage in between, it might be that you're sub-optimizing. So you can maybe
Yeah.
pull it, pick one specific lane and try to optimize the truck fill as much as possible to make sure you're running very optimized and smooth on that lane. But that might give, for example, inventory troubles in the receiving DC, or that
Yeah.
might give a challenge in working capital or in order acceptance in the receiving DC. So it's very much our idea to really look at that holistic end-to-end view, because if you can do that, you can typically find the root cause of the problem and not just the superficial thing that we thought there was a problem with.
Yeah. So so creating this digital twin. So and a digital twin is a so if I would visualize that, that's like a copy of all the relevant supply chain data, and then you use that data to run scenarios and to try out this new.
Mhm,
So let's take the lane for example.
mhm,
So you have a copy of the data for I guess a couple of
mhm,
months, and then you edit or you optimize this one lane, and then the analytics software, if I say it
mhm,
correctly, it can look at the change, and then you can analyze, is that a good change or is it not a good
mhm.
change?
Well, yeah, that's more or less how you say it is also how it works. But let's start with the digital twin concept. So
Yes.
indeed, the first thing we do is collecting data. Is really trying to make a digital copy of what is happening in the real world, um, and
Mm-hmm.
that data has to be enriched, because um, in a supply chain there's so many, and especially in modern supply chains, because from the trends we have seen over the last months, years, um, supply chains are so much influenced from the outer side. So you can not just rely on the traditional ERP data or just normal data that comes out of a customer system, but it has to be enriched with external data sources. Think of
Okay.
think of weather data to understand certain patterns are influenced by the weather. It might be, if you sell beer, for example, that when the weather is nice, that you will do more transportation in the summer rather than in the winter. So we try to
Mm-hmm.
enrich that data to really understand what is happening, but also what they are the external factors that influence what is happening, because that's what we want to measure as well. Um, and there we try to make a vision that has enough complexity to understand these patterns, but that also don't have too much complexity that the user cannot understand what is happening anymore. So there's a sweet spot there to really understand to what level of detail do we have to go and what granularity do we have to go, and that gives us the current situation. Um, a current situation where we can constantly monitor um, key variables, key things that are changing. Think of logistic prices, but also timings. Think of lead times from a supplier and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It allows us to really monitor the most important specificities in the supply chain. Um, and then we start building the algorithms. So that's also what you were mentioning. Because as soon as we have that as this situation, we can think of, okay, how can we improve this? And the first thing is, and there are two ways in that. First is we develop the scenarios ourselves from a more business user perspective, where we sit together with the customer and try to understand, okay, what can we, what are the constraints we can really optimize within? What are the things where we want to go, and we can simulate those what if scenarios and see, okay, that's a good decision, that's something we want to do. Maybe we can decrease the stock level in that warehouse a little bit and then increase it somewhere else, or we build a new warehouse to make it more efficient. Second option there, Martin, is a little bit like you mentioned it,
Mm-hmm.
where the algorithm themselves can recognize patterns based on the data that we've gathered. To again take the example of lead times, if suddenly your lead time is increasing, since the last couple of weeks, we've seen it evolve from 4 days, that is typically the typical lead time for a certain supplier, and it increases to 6, 7, 8, 9 days, then the algorithms can
Mm-hmm.
recognize that. They can recognize there's something going wrong because it's increasing, and then the algorithm can give the recommendation to say, it seems like the supplier is not really in time. The lead time is getting longer. So maybe we should increase the safety stock to make sure that we have enough buffer,
Ah,
that we
yeah.
don't run out of um, that we don't run out of product. Um, and then
Yeah.
again, the user gets to see that, the business user gets to accept or decline that recommendation, and we can move forward. So it's two-folded. To conclude, one, where we can drive the decisions and where we can really run
Mm-hmm.
simulations that we have, let's say, in our gut feeling, and take a data-driven approach towards that. Other than that, there's also some kind of pattern recognition by the algorithms for certain key drivers, where we can then where it can then give recommendations on certain actions to take.
Yeah, and I think a common one that most people in logistics know would be like a route optimization
Exactly.
algorithm.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
route optimization is one of the algorithms that we have in our portfolio. And yeah, to give a good example, there, for example, the the algorithm can look at the orders of the day and can see, for example, whoa, this customer has suddenly ordered 7 pallets instead of the average that it always orders, which is two. So we'll have to adapt the routes to make sure that we can drive as full as possible, and do different customers in a different manner to make sure that we can most optimally deliver all of these customers. So it's a good
Yeah.
example, Martin, I think. And the key advantage there, because there are a lot of route optimization um, or a lot of route optimizers out there, is that by having that digital twin, you have the dynamic aspect of it. Dynamic in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
um, you always look at the newest data. So that helps in re-optimizing and redoing it again, and learning from the new data that comes in. So by having it dynamic and by constantly monitoring, you achieve a lot more than doing a one-time optimization, let's say.
And where you speak about different goals for creating these algorithms, then again going to the route optimization. I mean, you could optimize for I want to minimize the number of miles or kilometers my trucks drive because I want to drive down that cost. Or you can put in constraints saying I want every truck to be on time.
Hmm.
So no matter what,
Yeah.
or I don't want trucks that are half empty.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing there's different uh, reasons, or how do
Yeah,
I say this?
exactly,
There are
exactly.
different ways to optimize
Hmm.
or different business challenges.
Exactly. And I think, Martin, we touched upon the point already a little bit previously in the conversation, where we said we don't just want to help them in traditional logistics, but also think along in terms of strategy. Because what you're saying there is actually a strategic question for many companies. And they have to make the
Mm-hmm.
trade-off. Um, where do I want to be in my cost service trade-off? Do I want to provide the perfect service to my customers? And is that where I take my key advantage over my competitors to make sure that when a customer orders with my company, he always gets his goods in time, he always gets his goods as fast as possible, and he always gets his goods um, in full quality, then probably that will cost more. That will
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
impact the logistic costs, and you will not be able to run as efficient as a company who decides to, no, I don't want to be a customer intimate player in the market, but I want to be an operational excellence player in the market where I focus on doing my logistics as cheap as possible to make sure that I have a competitive advantage over my competitors and to make sure that I can give the best prices, for example. So you don't just come to operational logistic problems, but it links quite often by determining, for example, these objectives to the supply chain strategy. And that's the beautiful thing of it, because you can take the holistic view and look at the helicopter view and look at what is our supply chain strategy. And using the digital twin, you can drill down to very specific problems, like, for example, the vehicle routing, but it might also be a stock problem in a certain
Yeah.
DC, because when you go for the customer intimacy approach, you probably have a little bit more stock compared to the operational excellence player. Um, where you say where the customer intimacy strategy thinks, well, I never do want to run out of product. I always want to be able to deliver my customer, so I have a higher safety stock level. Compared to the
Yep.
operational excellence player who will say, I only have enough safety stock for 95% of my orders. And if I run out, well, then I'll take the costs, but I will have to do something. So there's quite a big link to supply chain strategy as well.
So what companies can do that have this digital twin in place is they can start turning these dials and see what happens. So what if I increase my service level to 99%? What's going to happen with my
Mhm.
cost? Or if I go down to 90%, what happens with my cost and what happens with my efficiency?
Exactly, and that's
Okay,
the
cool.
beauty of it. You're not running or simulating all of this in the real world. So, in fact, the craziest ideas cannot mess up your logistics, let's say. Uh, but it
Yeah.
but it it really allows you to understand what are the drivers of my decisions and what are the results. So you can test so many scenarios, and actually you can really change your strategy. I have customers, for example, who said, well, let's try the both extremes. Let's try to make a supply chain that is totally cost efficient, and where we don't care about service level, and see
Mm-hmm.
what the costs are there. But let's also try to go to the other side of the spectrum, and let's try to be within every customer within 1 day of delivery, so we can make sure that whatever the customer asks, that we can deliver him. And by running these two extremes in terms of scenarios, um, they really understand, okay, or they can then decide where do we want to be on this spectrum, and what is now the exact um, so or what is now the exact logistics network that we go for, um, and from now on we base our decisions on this strategy. So by having the digital twin, you can really yeah, plug and play, and think of where you want to be in terms of strategy, but also how can within those boundaries you can optimize, let's say.
So, Miguel, you've made it abundantly clear what the possibilities are for a digital twin. So can you, as a recap, state once more what companies can do? So what are the steps they need to take themselves, and the steps that you take for them to get to a digital twin?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, for sure. I think um, uh, recapping it is let's start with the why. The why is quite often um, things are changing so fast, and traditional supply chains have always been designed for a non-changing environment. Um, so
Yeah.
um, traditional supply chains are like, okay, we want to be the cost optimal player, so let's design our supply chain for stable demand and do our forecast every year. But that's not the reality of today anymore. There's so much
No.
changing. So I think that's the first thing is understanding the why of a digital twin and understanding the value. Second step is then um, assess what data you have, and you can do that by yourself. You can do that using other companies who provide the services. But it's really understanding, okay, what data do I have and what data is needed to at least get to some form of a digital twin. Um, Secondly, we have, and I think that's the most important step, is the
Mm-hmm.
business assessment, because it's also, you can just build a digital twin, but it's really, how does this fit in our business? How does this fit in our process? And how does this fit in our future vision of our business? So there's a very important step in business wise to really understand what you want to achieve with it. Um, and then it's about modeling it, so where you can use experts with data knowledge to really build your supply chain model and to really build the digital twin. And then final step is about playing and understanding your drivers, but also in understanding um, where you'd like to go, what scenarios you need to optimize, but also what drivers do you need to take care of to make sure your supply chain keeps running smoothly. So I think that's a little bit the different step. Start off with the why, understand what data sources are available, think of what context you play in as a company and what your business requirements are, and then finally build the digital twin and run the scenarios where you think these are more optimal, and make sure that your model or that your model looks at the right drivers in your supply chain, and then take the right conclusions and right actions from it. Because what we also see is that you can have the state of the art software, you can really have the digital twin, but it's sometimes difficult to also implement the recommendations. So there has to be a process as well at the end of of those different stages to make sure that what you gain as insights and what you gain as decisions, that these also flow back to the business to make sure they can become a reality as well. So I think that that's a little bit the different steps we have, Martin.
Great. Well, Miguel, thank you very much for explaining the concept of the digital twin to me. I mean, I had an idea about what it was, but you actually gave me a lot more insight in what the power of a digital twin, what power it can hold. So, thank you very much for sharing this today.
Yeah, that's you're very welcome. You can start small. You can really achieve something with the data you have, whether you're in the early maturity stage or not. And I think that's very powerful because um, everyone's becoming more data driven, and the current reality forces you to become more data driven. So I think that's the cool thing about combining technology and supply chain knowledge there.
Excellent. I have nothing more to add. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Does Logistics Matter? For more on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics, visit our blog at www.logisticsmatter.com. This podcast was produced by Dimitri Vleugel. The music is based on a sample by Ruggerman and produced by Michael Spengler. This episode was sponsored by Ahlers. For more than 110 years, Ahlers has been helping clients all over the world. Active in 3 regions, Europe, CIS and Asia, they provide state-of-the-art logistics and tailor-made solutions. Their services focus on supply chain solutions, warehousing, project and machinery logistics, secure transportation of high-value and/or theft-sensitive goods, trade facilitation and after-sales services, and supply chain data analytics. Ahlers finds the best solutions that fit the customer profile perfectly. They enable customers to stay focused on their core business and manage innovative supply chain solutions which add value. They solve supply chain challenges in complex environments. Find out more at www.ahlers.com. That's AHLERS.